So we'll be starting in the next 6 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes, everybody. Thanks. You want to put the podium to the side? Or blocking their view? All right, welcome again, everybody. I am being told by my cameraman that we are going to be having live streaming, and it sort of doesn't look good when they are doing the live streaming and they're seeing the chairs. So they were wondering if you could come together as much as possible that they can see you better. Hope nobody's afraid of live streaming and to appear on YouTube, I would think. All right, everybody, welcome once again to the Ministry of Labour and Social Security's Western Region Roadshow. We were here in this beautiful city, I think, sometime in 2019, and we are back here. My name is Michael Kennedy, Chief Director of Industrial Relations at the Kingston Head Office of the Ministry of Labour. Just before I start, I just wanted to tell you a quick story. When I was in high school, I went to a co-ed school, and I normally like to sit at the back, as boys normally do. And the teacher came in one day, and she was from Linstead, Bagua, and she brought 10 apples, 10 beautiful apples, and she said, only the first 10 I can give in the front row. So if we're at the back row, we might miss something that is productive and nice. So the cameramen are encouraging you once more, if you could move forward as much as possible. Don't be too camera shy. Everybody looks well dressed and well rested and well fed and quite perfect for camera. So we chose the Western region to commence our mega roadshow for this financial year. Strategically for some other reasons, but one of the reasons is currently at the Industrial Disputes Tribunal, as of today, 53% of the cases that we have are from the Western region. So the majority of the cases referred for industrial relations matters is from the Western region. And that might say a lot. But for this particular session, we'll be zooming in on two areas, child labor and productivity. Many times persons don't realize that productivity is very important in the workplace, whereas child labor, we miss certain pointers that could decrease or even curtail human trafficking and child labor in Jamaica. So with us today we have Ms. Riesel Melville, the National Project Coordinator of the International Labour Organization, ILO Caribbean Office. The headquarters is in Trinidad and Tobago. But Ms. Melville is no stranger to us in Jamaica. In fact, persons think that she's a Jamaican because she's always assisting us in Jamaica with child labor issues. Invaluable assistance we have gotten from her, and she's here to tell us as stakeholders in the Caribbean, because we might be employers, we might be workers, we might be visitors to a particular industry, but we all need to be alert to child labor issues and for human trafficking. If in any way we can put in our 10 cents, as they say, to assist a child in need, we really should do that, and we should also not be contributors to incidents of child labor. So without further ado, probably I'm talking too much, we'll ask Ms. Riesel Melville to give her presentation on updating the child risk market and the acceleration action of child labor in Jamaica. Ms. Melville, please.
Good afternoon, colleagues. when you're vertically challenged, these things happen. So, and I do apologize for the delay to this presentation. We were trying to get some of the fancy new technology of the modern era to work for us, because I wanted to share some very interesting tools, and in fact, the key tool that we'll be addressing today, which is the child labor risk identification model. So, great. For those who have joined us in the room, it really is an honor to have the opportunity to share this information with you. So very quickly, You would have heard my name if you were at the launch this morning. I am Risel Melville. I've been working with the ILO Caribbean office for the past 8 years in various capacities, but consistently as the program officer and coordinator in the regional initiative Latin America and the Caribbean Free of Child Labor. And that regional initiative, to which Jamaica is a signatory and very active participating country, is comprised of 31 countries across our hemisphere that have come together and determined that to accelerate the rate of eliminating child labor in our part of the world, we need to work together. And so the regional initiative privileges South-South cooperation, meaning collaboration between countries and peers of the global South, to share knowledge, to share experiences, to collaborate on developing innovative tools that really and truly respond to our specific needs and contexts. And of course, Jamaica, I like to always say, has been one of the leading countries in the Caribbean, a flag bearer and a pathfinder for many of its Caribbean counterparts. Jamaica is literally one of 2 Caribbean countries that has a dedicated child labor unit. Jamaica has also a multi-partite, tripartite, intersectoral committee that coordinates the actions of national stakeholders on child labor through the NASTOCL. Yeah, I'm using acronyms that I assume everybody will know. And of course, Jamaica has often been the go-to Caribbean partner for sharing the good practices and experiences that Jamaica has been implementing and executing as it relates to child labor. So many times, the reason they know me is because I'm calling to say, all right, so Barbados wants to set up a committee. Could you explain to them how you all did it? Or I will call and say, we have an international conference, and I want you all to talk about the Jamaica's PATH program and the impact that it has on ensuring that children and families get the support, to go to school and have adequate health care, etc. And so Jamaica, in many regards, is a critical strategic partner that is not only working to eliminate child labor in the domestic context, but helping to push forward the actions and policies on child labor across our region. And I think you need to recognize that and applaud especially the work of our partners in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security in this critical area. Great. So for this presentation, I'll go to the next slide. Very, very quickly, I want to tell a very quick story, the story of Troy. Not Helen of Troy, Troy, Jamaica. So for all who don't know where Troy is, you should shame because I know where it is. Oh, okay, good. Troy is where the best yam is grown. So just in case you didn't know, and if I have anybody who wishes to object, pick it up with the people in Troy because it's them who tell me that them does grow the best yam. Good. So we'll tell the story of Troy. It's like those long ago silent movies. And so actually, it's really just a quick picture slideshow. It shows the Honorable Dr. Norman Dunn standing at the edge of what seems to be a bit of a ravine. Because in November of last year, through South-South cooperation with Brazil, Jamaica was able to show just what the child labor risk identification model has been allowing the Ministry of Labor and Social Security to do. We journeyed with a team from Brazil to Troy. It took us a while to get there. And we met with stakeholders, parents, children, small businesses, grandparents, teachers in that community. And we had a conversation with them about what child labor was, what some of its worst forms were, why it is each of us as actors in various domains have a responsibility to know what it is, be able to identify it, and be able to report it, and to know what services we can actually access through the ministry and, of course, other government agencies to address the real root causes of child labor. And on that occasion, we were accompanied by the Honorable Minister. And the citizens in Troy took the opportunity to show the minister firsthand what was happening because of the collapse of the Troy Bridge. And I'm sure people would know, from the political press stories what was happening with this particular issue of the bridge in Troy. And what came out of that experience was the clear correlation between the importance of this piece of infrastructure for children to have easier access to education. Because without that bridge, the dynamics of their situation changed. It would take them twice as long to get to school. And when you are in a remote area where transportation isn't necessarily available and accessible, the choice between walking for 2 or 3 hours, okay, maybe that's an exaggeration, walking for an hour or more to get to school versus just staying home and helping out whoever on the farm could be a simple decision because there's no bridge. And then let's say, of course, it's rainy season, heavy rains come down, and the little footpath that we saw gets washed away. We're back at square one. Why the story of Troy is important? The story of Troy is important because through the application of this model, which I will show you in a short while, Jamaica now has access to geographic maps, to visual representations of areas where the risk of child labor is higher than in other areas. That risk, if you ever saw a heat map where you have a dark red, a pink, you're right? So that's what it sort of looks like. And the parish where Troy is located was one of those areas that showed that there was a greater concentration of the factors that could push children prematurely into the labor force. And what are some of those factors? We think about economic level of development. Is it a rural community? How many, what is the level of access to educational facilities? How many schools are in the region? What types of industries are prevalent in that area, right? And so there are several factors which, when we consider them all together, indicated to those who sit in the offices in Kingston, hey, we could have a problem in this zone. And with that information, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security was able to go in and investigate and determine whether or not, indeed, there were issues that posed a risk to the welfare of our children and teenagers. And so a lot of governments oftentimes talk about the need for empirically based policy and decision making. Empirical meaning we need evidence. We don't just need a story. Well, I think I see somebody down the road, or they tell me so and so. Those are anecdotal stories. We need the data to tell us clearly what the reality is, what's happening on the ground, or at least to give us a clue. And then, of course, we deploy our human resources to go and find out, investigate, and that will guide us as to whether what resources we can commit, what actions we can take. And so, for me, okay, let me rush to the end of the story because I think Melissa will be waving the red flag for me to wrap up soon. The end of this story is that a policymaker going into the zone, now the issue no longer was a political, issue for debate in the cabinet or in the parliament or whatever. He saw the impact that the absence of this bridge was having on the constituents, on the children. And it was then determined, this can't continue. We need to take action. We need to find and dedicate the resources. We need to mobilize the construction to get this done. Because guess what? It will allow our children to resume their schooling, which we all know as Caribbean people. Education is the foundation. Anybody here sing Sparrow? Anybody know a little calypso? Where you talk about education is... Okay, never mind. But in our Caribbean culture, we know that education is the key to exploring and exploiting the fullest human potential, to leveraging our country's human capital for productive growth and for sustainable development. At the end of the day, long story short, Minister Dunn went, he saw what the problem was, he went back to the ministers and the government, and they took action to rebuild the bridge in Troy. And for us, that is a win. That is what the child labor risk identification model does, to give countries the tools to take action. And I'm glad you all are impressed. I was impressed too. It is a very useful tool. So we can move on from this story of Troy. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what the child labor risk model is. Why again? Well, you've seen why it's important. We'll talk about it. And right now, where we are at with Jamaica is that we are ready to update the tool. So a significant thing happened between now and when that tool was fully developed and applied to the context of Jamaica. Anybody wants to guess what that significant thing was? It starts with a C and ends with 19. Right, so the COVID-19 pandemic happened, and I think it has caused some changes in our societies, in our communities, that we need to take stock of and that we need to be cognizant of, that we need to factor into the empirical evidence that we are using to make decisions as it relates to policy and allocation of our scarce resources. So what we were trying to work out, and I'll tell you where the fanciness comes in, what we were trying to work out was showing you the live dashboard of the child labor risk identification model. So through the regional initiative that Jamaica is a part of, this dashboard is online. And what it does is allows anybody, any country, to see the various risk maps that have been developed using the model. And if we click on Jamaica, please click on Jamaica. So that's what the heat map, based on the data that we would have used from the 2016 Jamaica Youth Activity Survey and from the then 2010 census, showed us. And I'm sure you all can already identify by parish where we have some differences. And if you click on one of those, on one of the parishes, if you click on the map, it actually takes you a level down. It will show you the constituencies, right? And then, of course, it will explain what the data, what the model is showing us based on the analysis that the statistical model allowed us to do. Yeah, oh, sorry. At the top corner of the website, you say, right, that one. Thank you very much. Pero ustedes en Jamaica deben hablar español. Hay muchas personas que hablan español en Jamaica. ¿Sí? Yeah, that. I got into the airport. We came off a Copa flight from Panama, and I heard the officials in Jamaica telling people, gozo in Spanish. So I am surprised. Anyways, so what the model actually does is it allowed us to go down to constituency level, because we may have, for example, an entire parish showing orange. But when we drill down, it is only a particular constituency within that parish where there is a higher risk of child labor. So now we're not just trying, it's like when doctor have to give you medicine. They say, doctor, my knee hurting me. And then he gives you a painkiller which numbs all the pain. No, we cannot afford all of these painkillers. So we just want something to target the knee pain. If you understand my analogy. Right, so these maps allow our policymakers and our technocrats to see what's happening, or at least to have indicators on what's happening, and then to be able to target their attentions. We don't have all of the human resources or all of the financial resources that we wished that we needed. All right, good. So so you see, I have to stop preaching to the choir because I know you all are on board with me. Good. So we're moving on to the next slide, and not the interactive map. For those who are interested, we can always share where that link is. It's publicly available online, and you can go in and see what the risk map is telling us. So the big caveat for today's discussion is that these maps were generated with information pre-pandemic. So we know that the pandemic would have forced some children out of school. Remember, schools were shut down. And there's a whole heap of children who never made it back when schools reopened. So where are they? What's happening? We know that some families would have suffered significant loss through the deaths of various members, through the loss of their livelihoods. And so the socioeconomic pictures of the reality of Jamaica have shifted since the pandemic. And we need to update the data that we have used to generate these models to have a more updated understanding of what's happening as it relates to the risks for child labor, right? And so I'll go to the next slide. Let me see which one you have. And so we want to initiate a process, of course, based on the request that ILO and the regional initiative have received from our counterparts in Jamaica to update the model. And so there is a particular consideration now which is really important to include in an updated and revised version, and that is the gender perspective. Because another impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is that it had outsized effects on women and young girls. Just in case you weren't aware, a lot of the burden of caring for families and for persons when we were shut in fell on the women. And so you heard Gillian refer to looking at the development of the care economy, but also gender-specific considerations, because the effects of child labor on girls differs from the effects on boys. The characteristics of the kinds of jobs and risks that young girls and young women are exposed to would differ in many instances from what affects boys. And if we really want solutions that work, if we really want to change lives, then we also have to be cognizant of these gender-specific implications and tailor our interventions to suit, right? And so one of the things we would have already initiated earlier this year is a review of Jamaica's model and looking at where the gaps on gender analysis are. And so it's important, and I'm saying this, that one of the things for a revised version needs is more gender disaggregated information. And so in our record keeping, in our statistical surveys, the importance of noting gender and the differences between the effects and impacts on the different genders is important because we can use that information. Moving on. So what will the process entail for us to update? And I promise you I'll be rounding the corner and heading for the finish line shortly, right behind Shelia. So we need stakeholder engagement because we need to be able to access data. Not only to access data, but to ensure that you understand as stakeholders the importance of this tool and see in the tool as well opportunities to support the work that you are doing in various instances, right? Because at the end of the day, child labor is not a problem to be solved only by the ministries of labor. It has implications for education, it has implications for health, for child protection services, for national security, especially when we talk about trafficking and forced labor, and rape and violence and abuse. Yeah, everybody has a role to play. Great, so we will be seeking to engage with stakeholders, have the necessary national consultations with key partner ministries and agencies, and have everyone's input on how we begin to redesign the factors that go into this model and have access to the data. Next one, we're going quickly. Data collection and analysis, of course. So after we engage, we will need to collect the data. Sometimes information and data exists, but it is scattered. It's not only in statin, it's not only in PIOJ. And important to this process are the administrative records that other departments and agencies collect. So when you talk about school truancy, how many children are cut in school on a weekly basis? or have low attendance. Where are they? What's going on? We need to work with you to have access to key administrative information that will supplement our understanding of what the numbers are telling us, right? Good. So data analysis, next one. Let me make sure I'm keeping pace in my guides as well. Almost done, almost done. Great. And then it talks about model adaptation. So recently, I know some of you may have seen enumerators around. We're updating our national censuses across the region. Yeah? And so remember, the first time this model was done, it was using population data from 2010. We are now in 2024. So we have to update that core information that's going into the model to have a better understanding of the actual realities. Muy bien? And of course, we are looking at seeing how we could support another Jamaica Youth Activity Survey to understand what are the economic activities that our young people and those who are minors under the age of 18 are involved in. All right, almost done. We're going one more. Right, so basically, the child labor risk identification model is a statistical tool that will take these data inputs, use a particular algorithm, which I kid you not, I do not understand, because math is not my first language. However, we have been collaborating with the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and they have the expertise to understand what the statistical model does. Additionally, we build national capacity, so we would have done training with officials at Statin to be able to understand and to run the model. Because the hope is that in the long run, this becomes one of the regular tools and implements that Jamaica will use to continue guiding its policy and other processes. One more down. Good. And as you saw, not only data changes, but sometimes our geography and our mappings need to be updated, especially as infrastructure changes, etc. And so having access to the GIS implements in Jamaica is going to be important for updating this child labor risk model. All right, almost done. Okay, SOS, you can go back. We don't wanna go down to the Spanish parts. But in brief, for us at the ILO, and especially with Jamaica's role in the regional initiative, it is an important activity that we would be embarking on to update this child labor risk identification model. I was glad to have the opportunity today to tell and to maybe showcase what it allows the government and other stakeholders to do. And of course, as I close, what we want to do is enlist your eyes and ears, because this is not an issue that we ourselves can afford to ignore or think it's a non-priority in our countries. Many of us in this room have children, or at least our aunties and uncles. And, you know, there are times when we have to look beyond the numbers, because one of my favorite authors says that numbers, big data, allows for abstraction, and when there's abstraction, there's distance. It's just, 2,000 people died, okay. But if I tell you John died yesterday, it has a different significance because you know intimately John. And so what we want to do is ensure that even as we look at the numbers, those numbers help us to connect with the human stories. Last word, I promise, last word. As we're looking indeed at transformation for sustainability and resilience, people must be at the center. At the end of the day, the world of work can only work if we have people, if we care for people, if we put the measures in place to protect and to ensure all of the human rights of people. And our children and our teenagers are very important people in that scheme of things. So we, of course, continue to urge a whole-of-society approach, a people-centered, human-centered focus to the work that we are doing, and we welcome your participation and collaboration with the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, with the ILO, and other national stakeholders as we take action. As Jamaica says, no to child labour. You all remember that slogan? I know it well, I know, I have my pen. So Jamaica, as you say, no to child labour, I want to assure you, you have the fullest cooperation and support of the ILO. Thank you for your time, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Riesel Melville from the Caribbean ILO office for sharing those important information with us. And as you heard, Jamaica is on the road to really improving based on data and extractions, their risk of child labor. In fact, I think St. Thomas in the east they have a high risk, very high risk, and Trelawney as well. You in St. James, low risk, based on the map that we just saw. Usually, the major cities are low risk. But as you heard, we are all stakeholders, so we have to be alert, we have to be aware. And one of the things that we could say is that when the Ministry of Labour's inspection team comes in, it could be to investigate a complaint of non-payment of vacation leave, maternity leave, or a dismissal. One of the things that we do and kill two birds with one stone is to look for any human trafficking, any incidents of child labor. I don't know if I should be telling you that to put you on alert or whatever, but hopefully that would not be. All right, so we thank, and Miss Melville Riesel is also very good with 3 languages. She can speak it fluently, I heard. Probably even 4 if you put in the Jamaican patois in it, because she gave us some as well. So thank you very much. It was very enjoyable. All right, so next we'll be learning about how we can boost productivity. And whether you are the worker or you are management, you have a responsibility, and what you do can affect the productivity of an organization. To that effect, I know we have Miss Urquhart ready to give us that information. Miss Mikhail Ann Urquhart. She has a very unusual last name. My vice principal at high school that taught me general paper at A-level was Miss Norma Urquhart. Very unusual name. I don't know if she's related to her. So she'll be telling us how we can boost productivity and resilience for the future of work. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kennedy, I'll tell you about the relation later. By a show of hands, how many of you have used a tablet or a smartphone to engage in work over the last month or last week? All right, put your hands down. And how many of you have actually used cloud technology or cloud-based applications in order to help you communicate with your coworkers, manage team meetings? And if you're not sure what cloud-based applications are, you can keep your hands up. They include Zoom, Google Workspace, Canva, anything you can think of, Dropbox. Almost all of you. So that's fantastic. It gives me hope, and it shows me that most of us have an appreciation of how digital tools can actually help us in the way we work, and also how it could probably improve our efficiency and our effectiveness when we do work. I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Rudolph Thomas, Vice President, Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Mrs. Cordell Williams-Graham, Executive Council Member, Jamaica Employers Federation, the Executive Directors, panelists, speakers, our MC, Mr. Kennedy, and all of you, our distinguished guests. Good afternoon. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here to represent the Jamaica Productivity Centre to talk to you this evening about how we can utilize digitalization tools in order to help us boost our productivity and also build our resilience as we engage in a new type of world that causes our work to look different. The Jamaica Productivity Centre, if you have not heard about it before, can someone just raise your hand? Have you ever heard about Jamaica Productivity Centre before? All right, if you have not, raise your hand. All right, I just want you guys to work off the food. But since for those of you who have not heard about it, this is your lucky day, you get to hear a little information about the Jamaica Productivity Centre. The Centre is a national organization that's responsible for promoting and boosting productivity at the national, the firm, and the sector level. We do this through a number of ways, and of course we are a department in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. We do this in a number of ways. We are able to offer customized workshops in which we share information on key productivity concepts, tools, and techniques for measuring and improving productivity and encouraging the use of strategies to improve performance while achieving business goals. We also allow for productivity assessments that will help organizations identify opportunities to improve efficiency, reduce waste, and enhance competitiveness. And we also estimate national productivity statistics that help us make informed decisions that will help improve productivity at the national and firm levels. Before we get into the meat of the matter, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I want to define what I mean when I talk about productivity, resilience, and digitalization. When we talk about productivity, we're referring to how much you're able to get done within given the amount of resources that you have. And when we want to improve productivity, it means that we are trying to do more with less. When speaking about resilience, I am referring to the ability of businesses to adapt to change and recover from disruptions. In this rapidly changing world where there are new types of disruptions, it is important for us to understand how we can be resilient. Now, over the last few years, you would have experienced a number of disruptions, right? Can you call out a few disruptions over the last 5 years? Barrel, anything else? COVID-19 was a big one. Right, so we have an idea of what those disruptions can be. And what we find is that the type of disruptions and the amount of disruptions are changing and becoming more frequent over time. Now, digitalization is involving leveraging digital technologies to improve processes, operations, and business models. It includes the adoption of tools such as cloud computing, data analytics, and artificial intelligence that allows us to enhance efficiency and customer engagement. Recent occurrences have showed us that this is very important. Now, global digitalization has revolutionized the way businesses operate all around the world. From automating repetitive tasks to enabling remote work, we expect that these advancements are supposed to help boost productivity. In fact, a German Logistics Association study revealed that digital tools can reduce costs by anything from 8 to 34%, depending on the sector. A Deloitte Insights survey indicated that companies with higher digital maturity can improve their revenue by about 40%, while those with low digital maturity can improve their revenue by about 15%. However, while we're seeing these increases caused by digitalization in productivity and efficiency within organizations, there's still what we call a productivity paradox. Now, the productivity paradox says that over these last few years, we've seen a lot of advancements in technology and digitalization that's supposed to help us improve our efficiency. However, globally across the world, we've actually seen a slowdown in the growth rate of productivity. And so that begs us to wonder, Why is this happening? A 2023 analysis conducted by the European Central Bank of over 2 million European firms found that on average, digital investments had a positive, albeit small, impact on productivity. For those firms that were able to actually get a significant impact on their productivity levels, they found that the larger productivity growth was a result of them having supporting systems in place and not focusing on just improving productivity now, today, but having a long-term plan of continuous productivity improvement. Now, among the sectors that experienced the most growth in this study were the professional, scientific, technical activity sector, office administration and support activities, and the construction of buildings and civil engineering sectors. There's another study that confirmed that digital technologies such as AI also require complementary innovations, have to also be developed and implemented at the same time when applying digital tools. And when we're talking about complementary resources, we're thinking about human capital, the people, we're thinking about new processes, and we're thinking about the organizational structure. Now, what relationship has been found between digitalization and resilience? Well, an IMF study done this year actually looked at 75 countries, and they found that digitalization in firms reduces loss of sales from recessions by about 2%. And another IMF study found that if the digital tool is implemented before the recession or before the disruption occurs, then the loss can be reduced by up to about 4%. Now, these studies actually highlight that digitalization does have a place, but it requires proper adaptation and proper timing. So to this respect, I want to look at a few global examples that we can probably look to see how we can fit in and see what lessons there are to learn for Jamaica. In India, it has been reported that they now have the fastest growing services sector. Can you guess which area would be? You said IT? Yes, you're right. So if you said IT, it's right. So they would have been growing their IT services over time. And the growth was really a nationwide push for digitalization, which included adaptation of cloud computing, data analytics, and artificial intelligence to drive decision-making and innovation. Additionally, there has been a push to use digital tools that support the creation of personalized customer experiences. Digital tools such as e-commerce and digital marketing have also boosted their ability to reach a wider customer base. India's IT sector offers a compelling example of how digitization can enhance productivity. Their tech companies have embraced digital tools for project management and client communication. Now, we could implement similar strategies in Jamaica that could help Jamaica's growing IT and business processing outsourcing sectors. We could adapt cloud technologies and AI tools as well. By doing so, it could allow local businesses to improve their project management, enhance their client interactions, and scale their operations more effectively. These investments, of course, must be coupled by training and upskilling the workforce. We can also look at the example of Germany's Industry 4.0 initiative. The Germany 4.0 initiative was launched in about 2013, and it has been touted as a landmark program for digitization. And what it did was allow German manufacturers to make use of digital tools in order to improve their outcomes. So German manufacturers have integrated Internet of Things sensors into production lines to monitor machinery in real time. This proactive approach helps in predictive maintenance, reducing downtime, and increasing productivity. Manufacturers have also made use of digital twins, which is having virtual replicas of something that's physical in order to improve their product quality without as much cost. Now they also use automation and cyber physical systems. You may be wondering, why is she up there talking about Germany if we're taking lessons from Jamaica, and we know that Germany has a very robust manufacturing sector? Well, while it's true that they have that robust manufacturing sector, what's also noted in this program is that they had a strong collaboration between industry, academia, and government, as well as there was a strong emphasis on the focus of innovation and research and development investments. Now, Jamaican manufacturers, even the small ones, can start with basic digital tools to monitor and optimize their production processes, which can lead to significant efficiency gains, starting with digital tools for inventory management and gradually advancing to more sophisticated technologies like predictive maintenance can lead to substantial improvements in productivity and cost efficiency. Tourism. So we're here in Montego Bay today. Tourism is a big thing. Now, in Singapore was able to introduce the Singapore Tourism Accelerator Program. The sector, through this program, has been able to use digital solutions to find ways to reduce energy costs and to solve worker shortage problems. The country uses data analytics to optimize visitor experiences, manage employee efficiency, and offer personalized services. They also use smart recirculation units and energy-saving temperature-control devices in order to optimize energy usage. For Jamaica, we rely heavily on tourism, and leveraging data to enhance customer experiences would not only boost the visitor satisfaction, but also improve our overall operational efficiency in hotels and tourist attractions. The last area that I'll look at today for examples of digital tools used across the world is in fintech. So globally, there are many examples of how financial technology has utilized digitalization in order to increase the flexibility and reduce the complexity of the services offered to its customers. And so we would see the use of big data analytics, robo-advisors, artificial intelligence, blockchains, all trying to improve the services that are available. In terms of looking at the lessons that we can get from Jamaica or get for Jamaica, is that we would want to be able to utilize the experiences, especially in trying to serve the underserved areas. So we need to build our resilience, and building our resilience, we have to start with having a resilient people. So beyond the technology, our workforce is going to be critical. Digital tools are only as effective as the people who are able to use them. And so if we want to use digitalization, or we want to implement digitalization, we have to make sure that they have systems in place for continuous learning and digital literacy that will help to empower employees so that they are willing to adapt, because we know that sometimes a lot of resistance comes from persons not being willing to take on the change. Now, in conclusion, we find that digitization offers lots of opportunities to boost productivity and improve resilience across various industries. We can learn from global examples and find out how we can apply it to the Jamaican context in order to drive our growth and innovation. And we have to embrace this as we move forward. It was said by John Chambers about 10 years ago that at least 40% of businesses will die in the next 10 years if they don't figure out how to change their entire company to accommodate new technologies. We can have a discussion later about that 40% and if it turned out to be true or not. But what really matters about this statement is that it shows that if your companies and organizations are not willing to adapt to the changing times, they're opening themselves up to the risk of failure. And so what we want to make sure is that you are not in that 40%. Now, to ensure that you're not in that 40%, it means that you have to maybe do some moments of truths with yourself or your organization. You have to do a technical assessment. You will need to identify whether or not you have been exploring technologies that are appropriate for your organization. And you have to assess whether or not your work staff or you have the appropriate skills to be able to utilize the technology if it is implemented. Now, if you want to learn more about these tools and how they can apply to your organization, you can reach out to the Jamaica Productivity Centre. We're here today, we have a booth, and you can always find us on social media, email us, call us, and everywhere, any other way you can reach out to us. But we are here and we stand ready to help Jamaica achieve its productivity potential.
Thank you very much, Ms. Michaela Ann Urquhart from the Jamaica Productivity Centre. And as she intimated, quite a few of us didn't know that the Ministry of Labour has an arm, the Jamaica Productivity Centre. It's on Harbour Street in Kingston, the Air Jamaica building that assists us in boosting productivity. Here in this presentation, I must admit, I am happy and I'm sad. I'm happy for the innovative technologies that we have coming, but I'm a little bit sad because I say it's going to take away from the physical manpower, the persons. When you look at all the technology and the AI coming, then you wonder if they're going to need the physical person being there. And that's why growing up I wanted to be a professional footballer, because you always have to have those professional footballers on the field can use new technology and do away with them. You won't have the game of football or soccer again. All right, so we thank you very much for alerting us to that boosting. A quick announcement before we ask Ms. Tamara Nelson from the Jamaica Productivity Centre to come and moderate the next session is that the second panel, instructed and guided, will go first, and we're asking the first panel as listed to defer a bit down the line. So the second panel, the future of work, digitization and the advancement of technology, which is an addition and an addendum to what we just heard incidentally, would be moderated by Mrs. Tamara Nelson. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right. So I am Tamara Nelson, as was said, the Chief Technical Director at the Jamaica Productivity Centre. And we just heard a presentation about productivity. So guess what? Everybody in this room, right now, you are all productivity ambassadors for Jamaica, right? So yes, I agree. And today we are now delving into the whole matter of the future of work, a topic which we are very passionate about at the Jamaica Productivity Centre because it has implications for our productivity growth and our economy on a whole. So we are looking at the whole matter of digitalization and advancement in technology. Now, technological advancements and their social impact have been evolving worldwide. We have automation, remote work, AI, and other digital technologies. They all play a very pivotal role. And guess what? It's causing labor to be more mobile than ever before. We all know about Upwork and Fiverr, seeing the nods. And some of you may already have been participating on these platforms. So we are seeing the shifts, and we are confronted with several paradigm shifts. But it's not the first of its kind because we have had many revolutions in the past, not only technological, industrial, globalization, and all of them are equally confronting, if not more so. So in today we have in the room a number of you. Let me just see a hand of who we have here. We have entrepreneurs. Any entrepreneurs in the room? Yes, we have a few. Job seekers. There are no job seekers. Employers. Yes, we have employers, employees. We have a number of us here. So if you're an employer, we're also employees, right? But yeah, so we have a number of you in the room, various ways, shape, and form. But the objective of today's session is for us to share and to have some key takeaways. And we have a very interesting panel lined up for you, and I'm going to introduce them briefly, because if I did not do so briefly, we'll be here for the rest of the afternoon. And let's get straight into the discussion. So first up, I'd like to introduce Ms. Janelle Williams. Ms. Janelle Williams is an attorney at law for over 7 years and at the bar, and she has many skills, including public speaking, leadership, and advocacy. And she is now assigned to the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, a statutory body within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Please make your way up, Janelle. Please welcome her. Thank you. So she just came back from the UN conference dealing with the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Welcome, Janelle. Next up, we have none other than our recent presenter, Ms. Michaela Urquhart, who will be joining back us here on the stage. Michaela is our Senior Director of Research at the Jamaica Productivity Centre. And if I were to list out all the other things, I would not, we would not start the discussion. So welcome back, Michaela. Ms. Sophia McIntosh, Dr. Sophia McIntosh from the University of Technology, Jamaica. Welcome, Dr. McIntosh. She's a lecturer and has served as program director of the School of Business Administration of the Western Campus. Welcome. I didn't know you were from this side. I thought you were in Kingston, Sophia. Oh, okay, so she has dual citizenship. Welcome, Sophia. Next up, Mr. Rudolph Thomas. He's a seasoned leader and VP of the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union, and also a fellow Woolmerian. So welcome. And last but by no means least, Mr. Yoni Epstein, the CEO and founding chairman of ITEL, an international customer experience provider. Please welcome him. Right. Mr. Epstein is actively driving policy improvements to private and public sector collaboration and to strengthen our position in terms of the outsourcing destination of choice. So welcome to all my panelists. I'm going to join you. Right, so we're going to start our discussion, and the theme again is digitalization and advancement in technology as it relates to the future of work. And we're going to start by addressing each person. We're going to keep it our response is very short, like about 2 minutes each. And then I'm going to ask a general question to begin, and then we go into the specifics with each person from your respective areas. So to start us off, I would like to ask the question about what the future of work means to you and how are you preparing for this in your respective areas. And we'll start with Janelle. You want to start us off? You have a mic? No?
The future of work. I am envisioning the future of work being highly driven by technology. I presume that is the word of the day. Particularly from our perspective at the Council, technology and the increased use of AI will assist persons with disabilities to tap into the labor market more effectively and efficiently. It's going to break down many of the barriers that once kept them outside. Sometimes we talk about accessibility. That will be a thing of the past because persons are now able to work from home or to use AI to assist in some of the more difficult tasks. So I'm excited about the future of work, and I'm really seeing it leveling the playing field for employees with disabilities.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sophia?
Oh, thank you very much. So I want to agree with what Janelle just said about the future of work as it relates to it being technology driven. I was at a function recently, and Mr. Courtney Campbell, President and CEO of Victoria Mutual, he used a phrase, and I really like the phrase, and he said that we are at a time, it's now 4.0, business 4.0, and education has to be 4.0 to prepare our people for the future of work. And in addition to technology, I was at another function with Yoni and in Kingston, and the future of work means that people have to be creative. We have to be innovative. We have to be adaptable. And throughout the session, I've heard those words, we have to be able to work in teams. We have to be able to self-reflect. How many persons can sit and self-reflect? And I know we have persons here seeking employment, and that is something that is very important. Our ability to self-reflect and look at ourselves and say, okay, I need to improve in this area. So we have to ensure digital literacy. I've heard about digital literacy throughout, and it is very important. And earlier, it was mentioned that the soft skills, and I think it's the minister who spoke about that, the soft skills are very important. So apart from the technology, we have heard that we need people. We need people who can manipulate the technology to get the results. And what it is that we need because the technology on its own will not be able to do the job, but we need people behind the technology to manipulate the technology. And what it is that we need from people are some of the things that I just listed. You have to be adaptable, you have to be creative, you have to be innovative, you have to be a problem solver, you have to be able to think on your own, you have to be self-directed, you have to be an independent learner. The last time I was with Mr. Epstein, he said that you also have to be loyal. You have to be a lifelong learner. And this is an area that I'm passionate about, Mrs. Nelson, because the world is changing rapidly. I remember my time when it was MS-DOS, and you would have to write commands and so forth. The world is changing, and what it means is that us, in order to fit in and exist in this world, we also have to change. And what does that mean? We have to embrace lifelong learning. And I've heard continuous learning. I call it lifelong learning. It's the same thing. And that has to become part of our culture. And I'm speaking to employers, employees. It is something that we have to embrace to exist as businesses. It is something that we have to invest in if it is that we want to remain relevant. So we have to get used to sending back our people to go back to school. And also employees have to ensure that they are deliberate and intentional in ensuring that they have the skills required for today. Right. I just finished school, I went back to school, and I'm going to keep going back to school because things I learned years ago are no longer relevant. And I know a lot of persons can attest to that, right? So lifelong learning, it sounds fancy, we talk about it, but it's not just to talk about it. It has to become ingrained in our society. It has to be in our DNA. It has to be in our culture, where every other word, when we speak to persons, we have to say, it has to be part of our performance management system. True. Have you gone back to school, right? So as I said, I'm going to pause here because it's an area that I'm passionate about.
We hear
and
it,
I
we
could
hear
talk on and on.
So we want to
but
give the other.
yes,
the other
so I'm going
panelists.
to
We'll
allow
get
my
back to
other
you on
colleagues
that.
to speak.
Definitely. So we're hearing about the need to be creative, adaptive, and that technology is actually helping to break down barriers and not causing a barrier. So we are now moving on to Michaela. Your thoughts on this?
Yes, I don't think I need to say much more on it, but when I think about the future work, I actually think about now. So the future work is now. And when we think about the future work, yes, we understand that it's driven by technology, but we also have to understand that a portion of it is also being driven by culture. A part of it is being driven by differences and changing in attitudes. A part of it is being driven by demographics. We are now at the point where we see the multiple generations within the workspace and what impact that has. We see more awareness about people's work-life balance and well-being in the workplace, and these are all issues that have to be considered when we think about productivity, not just looking at the technical space and working people, but rather how well people are able to work because they feel well, and considering those soft issues along with the technical issues. So for me, preparing for the future work means bringing awareness to those facts, as well as, yes, lifelong learning, ensuring that people are ready and capable in order to take on the challenges and the changes that the global space will allow for growth.
Thank you, ladies, for that. And now we'll move on to start with you. You're closest to me. Roddy, what's your take on the future of work and how are you preparing for it?
The future of work, from my perspective, can be encapsulated in one word: change. Mm-hmm. Because there's no way we can continue to operate how we do now or how we did yesterday and really embrace a tomorrow. We're, from a trade union perspective, what I envisage the future of work to be is one that includes different models of working, hybrid models of working. I don't know why today we are still stuck at this thing where everybody goes to work at 8 o'clock and everybody leaves at 5. So if I have any business to do, dog them a supper, because the places are going to be closed. So I see us having a lot of flexi work arrangements that will solve some of our transport issues and other issues. I see us having more work from home arrangements, remote working, and inclusion of even persons from overseas that bring expertise to our working model. I think that we have to become more focused on educating ourselves, and that applies to all players, right? Because the employer has to realize that based on some very unique shifts we have seen in the labor force recently, the workers are demanding certain things. They want flexibility, they want freedom, they want fair and justifiable compensation, and they want to be involved in deciding how the model looks. And then comes the matter of performance. How we judge performance or measure performance has to totally change. The old form that they use and they tick off how you perform over the year, that has to change. The workplace, definition of the workplace is going to change, because working from home, your home is the workplace. Then comes the thing about workplace insurance and liability, but that's another thing.
That's another thing, all right. Don't go there. I saw you heard the amens in the audience when you were
A lot of amens.
Okay, I heard them. So you're a preacher now. So we're going to move on. Last but not least, Mr. Epstein, your thoughts on the future of work and how we can prepare for it.
Sure. Good afternoon again, everybody. So, in my opinion, and from what we have seen, particularly over the last 18 to 24 months in the future of work, we talk about digital, we talk about AI, the mere fact of the individual being replaced by technology I think we've gone long enough now to realize that that's not happening. Where I feel digital is going to continue to enhance things is it makes us more efficient, means we can do more in a lesser amount of time. What the efficiency is also going to do is to not allow for people to have free time in the sense of sitting down, not being able to do work, or work not coming in. Efficiency will patch the work to them a lot faster, being able to get the job done more efficiently and better. And that is where you may find that you need less people to do the same work, not that you need less people because more of the technology is going to do the work. So I think there's a lot to be learned still. I think that there's a lot of opportunities in where technology is heading, and I think it's one that we need to embrace. We need to educate ourselves. We need to continuously learn as the technology is changing much faster today than it did even 5 years ago. But I continue to look at it as a benefit, but we can't rest and say that, well, because I have ChatGPT, I can write an essay. You still have to put your stamp on it and not make it just the technologies, right? So the human intervention is still very much needed in order to, articulate what you're saying in the manner in which you're trying. I see technology in a lot of countries that provide similar services to our organization. Technology is used to smooth out the accent, right? One of the beautiful things that we have here in Jamaica particularly is that we don't need that, right? We've seen where technology is used to enhance an agent to be able to build rapport. Again, that's something that in Jamaica we don't have a problem with, right? When we start to chat, we can go on for hours if we really want, right? And those are all differentiators as to why Jamaica has become so quickly very successful in the outsourcing industry. So we need to think again about how to use the technology to the best of our ability, take the opportunities out of it, and make it successful. So in short, if you ask me, the future of work has been here. We just need to adapt and make it work for us.
Well said, thank you. So it's not something to be feared, it's something we should embrace and to use the opportunities that it offers. Great, thank you so much, panelists. And now I'm going to head back to Janelle. Ms. Williams, as at the JCPD, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, and being the legal officer there, how is the legal landscape changing alongside the technological advancement to ensure that Jamaica's workforce is inclusive, especially for persons with disabilities?
Good question. All right, so we're talking about the landscape, legal landscape. So in 2022, the Disabilities Act was brought into operation, having been passed in 2014. And that act is accompanied by some regulations and some codes of practice. It speaks specifically to employment. And what the act has done is to break down the barriers as far as accessibility is concerned. So foremost, every entity, the common areas should be accessible. So that's a general rule. Now, when a person who has a disability is seeking a job, that person, the act stipulates, should be offered the same terms of employment as any other person. And it goes further to say that if you have an able-bodied employee who on the job, or it doesn't have to be on the job, but during the course of employment, they acquire a disability, that person is to be redeployed. So what the act is doing is to create a landscape wherein persons with disabilities should be found in the workplace. There are no excuses now. Just like anybody else, persons with disabilities are entitled to work. We know work is more than just showing up. It adds a sense of value, purpose, and so just like any other citizen, the person with a disability wants that opportunity. There's a code of practice specifically focusing on employment, and what it encourages employers to do is to have a disability management strategy. So in each entity, there should be a person who is called a disability focal point, and maybe someone who is a part of the HR department, and that person focuses on relating to the employee with the disability. The code breaks down the steps so that whatever the disability is, once the person is qualified and they've been employed, then the code teaches the employer how to engage with and relate to this person. My friend here from the trade union, the code also speaks to the trade union and is encouraging the trade unions to encourage employees with disability to be a part of the organization. So that is where the legislation is. That's the disability legislation landscape currently in Jamaica. Persons with disabilities are entitled to work, and we're seeking to sensitize our employers to take them on. I noticed earlier there were several hands raised of employers present. Can I see those hands again? Don't dodge me now, you know. May I ask, do you have one person with a disability in your workforce? Thank you. And we commend you for being an inclusive employer. So that is what the legislation is about. Inclusivity in the workplace.
Thank you. Give yourself a round of applause for,
Yes.
For being inclusive. So for those who did not get to put up their hand, one last question for you. What are some low-hanging fruits that they can employ, whether they are in services or manufacturing, that they can quickly address and become more inclusive to persons with disabilities while embracing innovation?
Good question. Quick. Amend your policy. I know we all have an HR policy. Just put a paragraph in there speaking to a disability focal point and the fact that you're willing and amenable to take on employees with disabilities. Engage in inclusive training practices. When you're putting your staff on training programs and so forth, try your very best to ensure that it's accessible to an employee that you have who may have a disability. So those are simple things we can do. If you have your common areas, and common areas are like the receptionist area, the restroom, a little bit of retrofitting, you put in a rail or two, and that can accommodate someone who uses a wheelchair. So not a lot of cost involved, and quickly you can get those results and become an inclusive employer.
Wonderful. Thank you, Janelle.
You're welcome.
All right, give her a round of applause, please. Thank you. All right. So we heard the minister said earlier, attitude is everything. We're going to turn to Sophia now. And one of the things I often say, that especially in today's world that we're living in, that the soft skills are now the hard skills. So, Ms. McIntosh, from an educational perspective, how do you see universities and training institutions adapting their curricula to equip future workers with the skills and traits needed for a digital economy?
Thank you, Mrs. Nelson. So as Janelle said, we have to be inclusive. If we want to build a resilient Jamaica, we have to be inclusive, and we have to be inclusive as it relates to education. How are we inclusive? We realize, because we have done the research, that in my time, when I was very young, not so young anymore, you had to have a 4-year degree or a 3-year degree. You had to go to university for 3 or 4 years. We recognize that persons now, organizations, need employees who can respond to a challenge in the organization, and that person may need to go to school for 6 weeks, 3 weeks, and learn the skills specific to that particular problem in the organization. So that is how we are responding. We are ensuring that we have short courses available, and we are ensuring also that we have to be inclusive. And how is it that we are being inclusive? If persons did not succeed, let's say in their CXCs, we have alternative pathways now to allow students to come to university, because we can't leave anybody behind. So it's not just to talk about resilience, but we also have to adjust and ensure that we're not just talking, but we're doing. So what do we do at my institution? We ensure we have modules that we call foundation modules. So if students were not successful, if they come, we try to offer them those foundation modules, and we work with them to ensure that they are not left behind. I'm tired of hearing that we have so many unattached youth. And where are these persons? We have to ensure, because they are Jamaicans and they need to be part of the productivity of Jamaica. So we have to ensure that we are inclusive in that regard. We also have to collaborate. And that's how we're changing, so that I'm tired also of hearing that when students leave universities, the skills that they have, when they go on the job, they can't perform. And you have heard that many times. So we have to ensure that there is a strategic fit. Whatever the skills that are needed, the students, when they leave, they have those skills. So greater collaboration, and we have been doing that with our partners.
Thank you for that, Ms. McIntosh. So in terms of a follow-up question, what are some key areas that institutions should prioritize for a sustainable workforce? How can businesses help you to help them?
How can businesses help the universities? If you have an employee, you have to make lifelong learning, as I said, a culture in the organization. Sponsor your workers to go back to school. Give them, my friend said it, give them time off. Let the working environment be something that you look forward to going. I'm tired of persons saying, I can't wait for 4 o'clock, because they're so stressed. So businesses, don't cut the training budget, because sometimes when things go wrong in the organization, the first thing, it's an easy cut, is to cut the training budget, and then you say that your staff members are not productive. But you have to invest. So businesses, give them scholarships. We also, as an educational institution, we need support, we need resources, we need labs, because we have to respond to the needs. So we're looking at cybersecurity, Internet of Things, you spoke about it, computer programming, we're looking at data analytics. So we're doing a lot of computing programs. But guess what? We need money, we need labs. We also have to ensure that people are properly compensated to get the best skills. So I'm appealing to organizations, employers. If it is that you want to boost productivity, the evidence is there, the data is there, you have to ensure that your employees have the skills. So collaborate with the institutions. I don't think I can say it enough. And please, may I beg you, don't cut the training budget. Don't cut the training budget and then say that you need productivity, but then how are you going to help your employees to have the skills? We have to build a strong ecosystem, What we mean by ecosystem, all we have to do it. If we want a better Jamaica, if we want our businesses to improve, all of us have to come together and collaborate and stop the talking and start doing.
Yes, action. Right, so we have a follow-up from Yoni quickly, and then from Michaela and after.
So you know why the training budget get cut? Because we have to hire more people to do the same job, because 20% of the people don't come to work every day. That's why people are stressed at 4 o'clock, because there's more work being asked of them to do because their colleague didn't come to work. So going back to you saying we have to act and we have to start there. The importance, one thing I would have loved to have seen is there's a bunch of people outside looking work. It would have been great for them to have been in here to hear this discussion and learn from some of the talks that are happening. Because that's where we need to invest the time and the energy is in our workforce. They're not going to get better if we don't put time. And today is a training session, right? Even training in preparing your resume, to talk to people, to get interviewed. You may not get hired the first time, but you may get hired at the second desk that you're going to talk to. And that's all building and developing on our workforce. The other point that I want to make, and I see the minister just walk into the room, and maybe he can help us a little bit, is you're asking for computer labs, I assume. Every single call center in Jamaica turns over their computers every 3 years. That's not because they're bad. That's not because they can't do more work. But typically, most of these machines are leased from the big name providers. They are not going back into work or being sent back to the US or wherever they came from. They're going into a closet because we can't donate them or even resell them as secondhand because of mostly because of the fiscal benefits that we get. None of us want to sell them back. We've depreciated them off of our books. Their value is zero to us. But if we can give them to schools and labs and things in a very easy way, like to charitable organizations, so it's not for sale, not for profit, that is what we need to try and focus on as to how we can help schools and other areas get.
That's commendable. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Very commendable.
Minister gave some work, but I'll work with you on it.
All right, Michaela, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so you mentioned the idea of collaboration and you mentioned the training budgets, but I was also thinking that for collaborations with the training institutions, you also need for the private sector to tell you what they demand in the curriculum as well. So to build a partnership from that end as well. And we do that.
Thank you, Michaela and Roddy. Because this is education and training is something that touches everybody.
Everybody. So from the standpoint of the BITU, we have put a premium on education and training to the extent that coming out of one of what we have every other month, we have our officers meeting. I instruct from the president of the union was that every claim that is served for negotiation must have an item that speaks to training and upskilling. We would have been able to accomplish that and have it in several collective labor agreements now. The first one that I recall being successful was one in a hotel, a Spanish hotel, that we said, listen, you must carve some time out for workers to learn Spanish because at some point you are going to endeavor on some form of an exchange and they're going to go to your country and the other areas you're working and come back with that skill set and enhance Jamaica. So education is very key to us and we have been putting it in our collective labor agreements. What we must also recognize is that even as trade unionists, we have to modernize the hats that we wear. We have to realize that our roles have become expanded to include things that they wouldn't have necessarily included when our labor legislations were written in the 1970s. We are dealing with a workforce now that is far more educated, far more advanced.
And vocal.
And vocal. And they have the access to their own college, which of course is Google. So if Google says it, they are going to come and they are going to take you on the concept. We have to become educators whilst there's a need for change with employers. And I've had the pleasure of working closely with some BPOs. And when you have the need for this kind of change, we have to be educators that bridge that gap between the perspective of the employer and the desire of the workers. We have also to explain to the workers why there has to be change. It cannot be the same because that's how it was yesterday, or else things will never change and improve.
And we don't want that. So we are all about changing, we're all about improving, we're all about growing. And a key word for this conference or this summit today is resilience. And resilience includes not only how we respond, but how we react, so it is a twofold to it, two-part to it, in terms of recovery. So the productivity is also at the heart of any workforce transformation and resilience. Given the many opportunities to improve, Ms. Urquhart, and that work is always evolving, how do we know when we have caught up to the future of work?
I don't think you ever catch up to the future of work because it's always changing. But I think what we really should be focused on is trying to get ahead of the curve, right? So what we want to do is that, and we would have seen from lots of research, that if you're able to fortify your business, to improve your productivity levels, to improve your efficiency before you are faced with a situation where you need to be resilient, then you automatically become more resilient at the point in time. So so the idea is to be forward-looking. The idea is to be able to assess the risks that are related to your organization and be able to implement the strategies that are going to help you mitigate those risks. And ultimately, once you can be more competitive, once you're able to improve your efficiency, you will put yourself or your organization in line to build its resilience.
Indeed, indeed, that whole matter of efficiency is key. Time is one of those resources that is so critical to our resiliency, to our productivity, to our growth, and towards the future. We were having a discussion on that just now, myself and Mr. Epstein outside. But what are some of the most significant productivity challenges you're seeing in Jamaica's digital transformation, Mr. Eckhart, and how can companies overcome them?
I think the one that is the most obvious one is the people. So there is two ways in which that can be true. So the people, because one, they can be resistant to change, and sometimes when we have organizations, as someone mentioned, it's just like you're saying, okay, you have to do this because I said so, but there's no understanding of how this is going to help me be a better worker, how this is going to benefit me, how does it free up my time to be more creative and efficient when I have these new skills. The other thing is that the skills just are not there, they're not lacking, and they're not prepared. I think to a certain extent, you have persons who would have already graduated a long time ago, and they're not being able to benefit from some of the new soft skills that you need and some of the new technologies that people want them to have. So even going into BPOs, you would have heard complaints that people going into those organizations are not able to do what some people consider to be simple things in terms of managing customer service, skills, being able to talk to people, being able to use Word and PowerPoint, things that today we would want to take for granted. So I think really focusing on the people is going to be the first strategy.
Thank you, Michaela. And because you're a researcher and because this is productivity and I am not being neutral right now. But Minister spoke about collecting and analyzing data, and I want you to just touch on that briefly for me. Could you provide some examples of measures that are critical for businesses, especially in labor-intensive industries, to ensure that the whole matter of digitalization doesn't worsen the existing inequalities, but that they can improve and grow?
So I would say even before talking about the measures, I think that the first thing is just tracking it, any at all, is a first step. So before you even get bogged down in what specific measure to use, make sure that you're tracking it, making sure that you're focusing and monitoring whether this change that you're making is going to work. And if you want to look at measures, of course, there are things you can look at, like the amount of output per worker. You want to look at the amount of money that you're spending on the resource and what you're getting back for it. So you can look on the return on the investment for a particular type of digital tool or investment. So those are some of the main ones that would be easy for most organizations to
Indeed. And I must say, just to add, we audited at the Productivity Centre a company for an award last week, and one thing that was noteworthy was that this company was performing at maximum because they were measuring everything. They were measuring everything, and not only were they measuring everything, it was accessible to everyone. So persons could use the technology to access the data, to see where the company is, to see what they need to do. Nobody had to be running behind them and telling them, oh, you need to fix that. It already flagged them. They know what they need to do. So everybody was held accountable for what they need to do. So much so that they measured their time utilization. So as managers, they measured how much of their time was spent in meetings. And one thing that came out was that the manager in question we were auditing was 80% of the time in meetings. That would not allow for any implementation or work. So they then actively reduced that from 80 to 50, where he now had more time for implementation. So, there are many different things. So we just need to develop that measurement culture, and that will help us significantly as we navigate this landscape.
I just wanted to add
Yes.
that another thing is, especially if you're looking at digitization and bringing on digital tools, another thing you want to make sure that you're doing is that you want to make sure that you're actually looking at the extent to which the digital tools are being used in your organization. So sometimes they're implemented, and we're looking to see what the efficiency levels are, but we're not looking to see whether or not they're being used and the extent to which they're being used.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's an excellent point. Thank you, Michaela, and we'll now move on to Mr. Thomas. There was a 2024 study by Partaker that examined digitalization and the impact of it on working conditions in Europe. And the data set had about 9 million employees across Europe in 22 countries. And what it came out, the survey came out and said that job quality declines as digital technology increases. Now, Mr. Thomas, with the rise of digitalization, automation, AI, how is the JCTU advocating for workers' rights, especially when it regards to labor-intensive industries and ensuring that we have no decline?
All right. Well, this is something that we have been doing from ever since. A part of our mandate as labor leaders is ensuring that we impact legislation that protects the workers and protects the quality of work. Another area that we concentrate on is one that ties in with what my friends were saying earlier on. Workers have to understand or be educated as to why the tools are being used and how they are being used. And we would have been able to keep seminars up to October of last year. We kept a very big one that spoke to digitization, the new world of work, etc. A very in-depth production it was. So we have those ways that we interface with workers to ensure that the quality continues. There are other areas that are important to workers too that we continue to advocate and push for. Health and well-being is something that is critical. A lot of emphasis has been placed on mental health now. And the truth is, when workers are stressed, they just cannot perform as well. I mean, all of us can attest to it. When I am stressed, I need a little nap, or I need to find a way to de-stress. And then my productivity is enhanced. We have to look at how the difference in how we define job security now. Job security isn't anecdotally. My father would have drummed in my head through my Woolman's years. I've worked at one place with government for my entire life from I leave school. And he did retire at a significant rank from that organization. But nowadays, the workers are not seeking that. They are seeking, what can we do here, and when do I move on? I was frightened when I thought my son landed a very comfortable job, and he has just decided to move on. He's at his third major job now at this time. And I mean, we have to be cognizant of what the workers really and truly need and try to treat with that. And we continue to play that role.
Thank you, Roddy. Anyone want to weigh in on that? No? Okay. So the other question, what emerging technologies are workers most and least prepared to adopt? What are they? What have you seen?
All right. So what we would have found is that in labor-intensive areas, workers are very skeptical about the use of technologies and artificial intelligence when it comes to, for example, in certain things that are done in agriculture. I watched a program recently and saw drones spraying off like 30 acres or 300 acres in a minute, just flying around like this and just spraying the entire thing, when you would have workers actually exposed to that chemical that is going through and spraying. And so the time and the efficiency and accuracy that it can do it with have those workers feeling threatened. I have no doubt, though, that with time they will come to appreciate that this change actually works out better for them, because there are other roles that they are being directed to right now. Anecdotally, I can tell you about when forklifts went to war for the first time, because people used to carry sacks and bunches of bananas on their back, and they literally beat the forklift, because the forklift could protect the work. Now there is no way you can tell a man to lift up anything on the wharf and say, get the machine to do it. So over time, persons adapt and change.
Thank you very much for that, Roddy. And now we'll turn to Mr. Yoni Epstein. There was a recent study that was done by Compete Caribbean on innovation and firm performance. And most businesses used technology in terms of communication. So about 98% use the telephone and 90% use emails. Yet they were skeptical of adopting to other technology. And even, especially among service providers, 63% lacked a plan to adopt new technology. So Mr. Epstein, as a leader in the BPO industry, which has been central to Jamaica's global expansion, what are the biggest challenges that BPOs in Jamaica face in adapting to the future of work?
There isn't really a challenge from the technology perspective, right? If you understand the business, we are providing a service to predominantly US-based corporations, right? Even the technology that we use, 90% of the time is their technology. So they're really setting the pace as to what we use to provide their service, whether that be the telephony system, the CRM system, all the things that get the job done is really stuff that they're driving. So yes, there is a want and a need to adapt for technologies that potentially could deflect calls into other systems that allow for more simpler matters to be dealt with by the AI. Yes, there are ways to, use ChatGPT type things to respond to emails and online chats and so on. But what we have found in the last couple of years is that while everyone ran off and wanted to try and adopt to AI, you had CEOs and directors in the C-suite in these large organizations demanding and dictating they wanted AI. But AI is not a thing that you can walk into a store and buy it off of the shelf and plug it into a computer and it just starts to work. It's not as simple as it sounds, nor is it as simple to provide the effects that you want. So while we look at some of our own data, that while a lot of companies are trying to do this, over 60% of the consumers still want to speak to a human. There are even laws that have been passed in certain states in the US already that you have to provide a human to answer that phone call or that communication from a consumer. So there's a lot of legislation going in place statewide, not federally yet, as to how AI is to be used and what AI is to be used for, because if not trained properly, just like a human, they'll provide the wrong information, right? So So I don't think, again, preparing for the future of work, I would say it's really around preparing our workforce as to the importance to productivity and getting the job done right. While we are, in Jamaica, Jamaica competes all over the entire world. In some senses, the call center industry is a commoditized industry. Their same service can be provided in South Africa, can be provided in Central America, South America, the Philippines, all over Africa, Europe, India. So the companies that are going to do the job properly are the ones that are going to win out. And that's where I think my greater concern for the longevity of this industry. It's not about technology, it is about our ability to get the job done right.
Thank you for that. And I see a theme in your comments so far is the human factor, and that's still very important, even with the technology, that we have to pay attention to that. And even earlier we heard about the human-centric approach that we need to have as leaders in our organizations. So one last question for you, Mr. Epstein. In terms of, we noticed that in the room we had a number of entrepreneurs. What would you share with them in terms of steps that they can take to capitalize on digitalization and becoming more global and competitive players?
I mean, again, there's a lot of tools out there, a lot of things that can make your business more efficient. Don't jump at any and everything. Right? Remember, there's always a salesperson at the other end of the line that wants to sell you something. So do your research. You know your business best. You know the key performance indicators as to what drives your business. So do your research. Test it out. They want to sell you. You must not sell them. So they will always give you a trial period for free. You can test it out. If it works for you and it works for your business, jump in. If it doesn't, keep finding, because there's so much tools out there to benefit.
Thank you so much. So the same question, 30 seconds or less for each of the panelists. What one piece of advice would you give Jamaican business leaders looking to embrace digital transformation and going global? You want to start, Janelle? No. Who was? You want to go first, Sophia? Your last piece of advice, 30 seconds or less.
Yes, I think the last thing I would say, and it is something that is sometimes overlooked, and I've heard about the human element, and it takes people for this change to happen, but who is going to lead that change? Who will lead the human element towards this new world of doing business? How we led in the past, we can't lead that way today. And I think that we have to reimagine leadership. Leadership has to be reimagined. Leadership can no longer look like that one person with all the information looking down on the lowly ones and instructing. We have to reimagine leadership to get employees to be motivated, committed, and to adapt, to accept lifelong learning, and to adapt to digital literacy. That is a critical part that sometimes we overlook it, but leadership has to be reimagined.
Thank you. Key.
I just want to add on to that, and I think it was mentioned earlier, but at Jamaica at 4.5% or 4.6% unemployment is a different Jamaica when our labor laws were established originally. And I think that the public sector, the private sector, and the unions really need to work together in order to evolve that to a point where we are today in 2024, or else Jamaica on a whole is going to get left behind.
Indeed.
And just to following up on what has been said, as I indicated earlier, our code of practice on employment So the employer, public sector, private sector, the trade union, and the employee, everyone has a role. And as we consider the human touch, we are in the era of technology. There's no going back. And what we have seen is that it does break down barriers. And so the playing field is leveled, and we're saying to all the stakeholders, employees with disabilities, it is their time. I don't think really there's any more room for excuses, because they can even have a workplace from in the home. So as we look to the future, it's about an inclusive work environment, a resilient work environment, and a more productive and creative work environment.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you for sharing that. Roddy?
A resilient work environment going forward must start, as my friend said, with leadership and changing how we lead. We have to realize what is driving the workforce. We have to realize that it's a time to look at compensation reform. We have to realize that we have to start treating with workers with care. We have to realize that we have to be inclusive. And we have to realize that it can't just be the old model of looking at what do I have as a return to give to a shareholder. If you are going to attract and retain, you have to be looking at the human factor, the workers that you are working with, and encourage them to adapt, to take on these digital transformational changes, and to utilize technologies in the best way according to the environment and organization that they are attached to.
Thank you, Roddy. And last but not least, Michaela.
So my message to entrepreneurs, I think based on what we see in our work at the Jamaica Productivity Centre, is that there are many organizations that do not know that they need to measure their productivity. So I would say that you need to prioritize productivity from the beginning. It becomes harder when you're trying to use productivity to fix a problem that was created. Find the measures of productivity that work for your organization, measure, track them, and use them as information to see where you can improve, and just understand that it's a continuous process of improvement. And it doesn't have to be big improvements all at once, just continuous and incremental.
Thank you, Michaela, and thank you to my panel. Could you give them a round of applause? Wonderful nuggets shared. Human-centered, empathetic, transformational leadership. We're talking about the soft skills that are needed for the future in this ever-changing world. So I want to thank you all for sharing those nuggets. I know we could go on forever, but we have another panel to come on. And thank you, too, for being a wonderful audience, and have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you very much. Panel 2, which we had substituted and spin around a little bit. But before we get into the final panel, I want to formally acknowledge the presence of our Honorable Minister with us, the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., who has taken the time to be with us. Very hard work at the Ministry of Labor, and we want to acknowledge his presence here with us. Our next moderator is also a very hard worker at the Ministry of Labor. Once you work at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, it's just natural that you have to be a hard worker. And the brainchild of this roadshow and seminar, if you want to put it that way, is Miss Gillian Corodas. our Divisional Director of Industrial Relations and Allied Services, and we welcome her for the final panel to discuss the future of work along with how technological improvements, as we heard, could improve that aspect of it. So Ms. Carruthers, please. All right, we want to acknowledge the panel 2 and the various speakers, various presenters that we had there. And we have a little gift for them right here. And the first one is Mr. Epstein, Mr. Yoni Epstein, Chairman or CEO of ITEL CX. Is he still with us? Thank you very much, sir. Next is Ms. Jamil Williams, Attorney at Law, Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Thank you very much. Next, we have Dr. Sophia McIntosh, Head UTech Open School of Lifelong Learning. Next, we have Ms. Mikkel Ann Urquhart from the Jamaica Productivity Centre. Is she gone or is she still with us? All right, she's outside. And we'll move on to Mr. Rudolph Thomas, Vice President from the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union and also the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions. I'm wondering if we could give Ms. Urquhart's presentation to Ms. Nelson. Could we ask Ms. Tamar Nelson from the Jamaica Productivity Centre, please, to accept the gift for Ms. Urquhart? Oh. She's very much here. Just in time. These are treasured moments, so we're very grateful for it. And I should also acknowledge the presence of our acting permanent secretary, who is with us. Ms. Diane Jennings in the front here as well. Thank you, ladies. All right, so now we move on to Ms. Gillian Carruthers, Divisional Director, Industrial Relations and Allied Services, who will take charge as moderator for our final panel. Ms. Carruthers, please.
I will tell you what Mr. Kennedy whispered, that he could lend me his glasses. Good afternoon. I think it has been a very wonderful session, and we are very happy to have you in person with us, and also for those of you online. And I do know that there are persons who may not be watching it real time, but will have the opportunity to watch this at a later time. And there was a part of a discussion that suggested that our job seekers would really benefit tremendously from these discussions. And this kind of panel discussion gives us that content that we will be able to have played for them while they are doing our programs of placement. So it is something that is invaluable and has longevity in terms of our discussions here. We have had an opening ceremony. We are having the information session. We are at a place where we are looking to the transformation of Jamaica's workforce, looking at labor market supply and demand. We're looking at occupational changes. What does that all mean? I will do something that's not on your program. I'm going to invite none other than our Minister of Labor and Social Security, the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., to join me on the platform.
Thank you, Madam Kororus. Am I to sit or to stand? Or to...
Minister, whatever makes you comfortable.
Let me sit
because we're talking about a topic that makes some people comfortable, but others may be not so comfortable. Now, as you have had an opportunity today to interact with employers, to interact with the job seekers themselves, and I will tell you, it took us quite a while for the minister to go through because he was analyzing as he went through. What is your general feedback, Minister?
Well, firstly, good afternoon to everyone. I think we've had a good day, really instructive and informative sessions, and I am very, very happy that I had the opportunity to interact and engage with employers and job seekers today. It brought a lot of insight. Very often we hear the comment, Minister, I want to work, but I can't get to work. Or, Minister, I want some workers, but I can't get any workers. And you have to ask yourself, along this spectrum of discussion around work, why is it that we don't have greater intersection between this large group of persons who are saying to us they cannot find work and this large group of employers that are saying we cannot find workers? So today we really asked the question. We went around and we spoke to employers and we spoke to job seekers, and what you find is that they actually have the answers. And the government, we have to step in, as we are now creating these enabling environments, but even further, creating the greater network to allow for the conversation to start from the preparation of the skills, from the discussion around doing your resume, from the discussion in primary school around the attitude you need when you are speaking to anyone, because how you speak to anyone is going to dictate how you speak to your potential employer. From your whole issues of values and attitudes, and do you need to be punctual? Do you need to be honest? Who are you as a person? Those things are coming out because employers will tell you, as they have told me today. So we may interview a number of persons, but as soon as they sit down, this can't get a job, Am I right or wrong? But this can. Because I'm telling you, I'm looking on you, I'm here, I'm eager, I'm leaning to you. So we have to really start to have, as we have been doing, but to expand those conversations to make sure we are connecting work to workers and job seekers to their potential. The last thing is, what is clear, and the ILO representatives will be very familiar with these concepts of the evolving global labor market. The mindset of a younger worker is completely different now. When I mean, it is, what is the generation called? Gen Z. I don't even know what I am, but whatever. So the mindset is different, and in some positive ways and in some negative. What you hear from employers is that some of the younger workers are still on manners, but that's not general, because you have some employers who say some of the younger workers are just super bright. So at some point we have to try and funnel out and align, and I think a big part of our conversation at the next Roadshow has to now evolve into the space of remote work, virtual, online, flexible arrangements for work, because the new age, the new era of potential employee, of worker, is somebody who is coming to work in the day, going home and checking how their Amazon account did. Are you hearing me? They may be making more money than you, Mr. or Mrs. Manager, at home in the night, but just going to work because, it's what they have to do to have a stable thing until that Amazon kicks up to $20,000 or $30,000 or $100,000 or $150,000 per month. And then, at that point, you've lost the worker. They're gone. And so you hear a lot of employers speaking about the turnovers since COVID especially. And a lot of it is because you've had a significant shift in the mindset of persons who now know, I can be my own entrepreneur from my yard. I can stay in my room and I can take care of my bills by simply monetizing online. And more. So it's a good thing, but it is also something that several companies are terrified about. All right? So I think these are the conversations we're going to have to start having. Do we stay scared at the prospect that people will move on? Or do you extend your pool of potential workers so that you look on the natural patterns of migration from your job and you simply prepare people to come and fill the positions and get their experience and move? So those are some of the things that we discussed today. Again, I think it was extremely useful. What is clear is that job seekers are very, very clear on what they want. You could see the distinction in terms of where you had long lines of persons waiting to be interviewed and where you had few. And people are not going for minimum wage anymore. Because why do you? And so I think it is going to be forcing employers, or urging employers rather, to really revise your salary, revise your wages if you want to hold your workers. And in large part, that's a good thing, because it is the evolving workplace and all of the variables that are making us really see what the new dimension of work in Jamaica is going to be. But I wish I could stay. I have to go to another event. So I want to say to you, Ms. Corodas, thank you for the opportunity, and to say to all of you who are here, our friends from the ILO, friends from across government, from the Ministry of Labor, job seekers, employers, everybody who came to support. This is the answer to the question of what to do to develop Jamaica for the future. Continue this conversation. This conversation that you're having here should be a conversation that you have at Concept 360. It should be a conversation you have at the Ministry of Tourism, at the Ministry of Labor, and other places. It should be a conversation that you take into your own business so that collectively we can start to create resilience. Resilience is going to be created when we start to prepare ourselves for what is definitely coming. If you think people are monetizing online now, just project 5 years from now. My daughter is 14. She is already asking me about products to buy from Alibaba. This is serious. So when she reaches 18, if she starts in December, you can't hire her because you can't afford her. This is going to happen. So when you couple that with ChatGPT and artificial intelligence and couple that with the modernization of machinery, you're looking at a cataclysmic shift in what work and working environments are going to be. Get ready. Hold on and prepare yourself. Jamaica 2050 is going to be an awesome, dynamic place, and we have to be ready for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, and we really look forward to the robust discussions as Jamaica looks forward to participate in the second World Summit on Sustainable Development. And I think we have all been saying it has to take a human-centered approach, and Jamaica is ready. Jamaica is doing what it needs to do to look at where we are, plan for the future, and ensure that we go together in a very sustainable way. So thank you very much, Minister, and we will continue with our second panel. I will welcome to join me Dr. Dayton Robinson. He is part of the executive leadership team and of the Global Financial Institution, and we know that global financial institution as the VM Group. He's Chief Human Resource Officer. Welcome. And for those of you who may not also know, he is also a member of Jamaica's Minimum Wage Commission. So, Dr. Robinson, there's lots to talk about. We're talking about supply, demand for workers. You would have heard what the minister said. And I know that there's a lot that you're going to share. I'm going to invite a few others to join us in this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to invite to join me Miss Cordell Williams-Graham, and she is an executive member of the Jamaica Employers Federation. I am told that she may not be joining us. She has also the responsibility of leading as the CEO of the Transformational Life Solutions. And that organization has been doing training in change management, looking at what does a worker need to operate in the new roles, the new occupations, those changing occupations. Additionally, I will invite to join me Mrs. Carol Rose Brown, and for many persons, Carol Rose Brown is a household name when we speak about the tourism sector. She is also CEO of the Caribbean Consulting Group, and She has been in her role at the Jamaica Centre for Tourism Innovation, implementing human capital development strategies for the entire ministry, including the certification of industry workers, students of the college that are studying hospitality, tourism, or culinary arts. And also, she has been for a number of years facilitating faculty members, because it's very important not just to train the persons who will work in the industry, but training of trainers is also vital. She also has responsibility for exposing the students who are able to work in summer programs to the whole field of tourism. So welcome, Carol. And I will say, she altered her travel plans to be back in Jamaica for this convention, and we want to thank you so much, because the views that we share today are not just available today, but they will be available for posterity, for persons who want to listen to what Jamaica is doing in terms of our global partners, and also those employers who are not physically here with us, as well as current job seekers and future job seekers. So thank you very much for joining us, Carol. We have Miss Marissa Shepherd. She is the Just Transition Officer, and she is from the International Labour Organization. So Marissa has flown all the way from Trinidad to be with us here physically, because Jamaica will be, in a few days, I will say, engaged in a very transformative project in relation to just transition. I will not say much more, because we're going to hear a lot about what it means and how you, in your own space, can be part of this wonderful effort to advance the green economy, green jobs, as we call it. So let us put our hands together for Ms. Shepherd. At this time, I make apology for Mr. Granville Valentine, who is unavoidably absent, and we know that we would have seen him had he not had a medical issue this morning. So, not life-threatening, but we know that he will have a speedy recovery. All right, so let us dig into it. When we talk about labor demand, when we talk about labor supply, I'm teasing you a little bit. The way we spoke about it 5 years ago has to be different from what we speak about today. The conversation has to change. The demographic that we are looking at employing is changing. When we looked at the close to 1,000 persons turning up for interviews today, it is very obvious to us that we have, I would say, more than 85% in the category of Gen Z. In terms of their training and their preparedness for work, what are we seeing in terms of the soft skills? What are we seeing in terms of their technical competence? I notice Dr. Robinson shifting in his seat, and I'm asking the provocative questions, because we're going to get rolling shortly. And when we talk about the Gen Zs, are we truly providing the employment that they really want. Over to you, Dr. Robinson.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here, especially being on the stage with three beautiful ladies, so it's a plus for me, right? Okay, all right, so permission to be pragmatic about this discussion, right? So I have a very different view when we talk about, in business we talk about talent rather than just labor, right? Because we're looking for a particular type of employee within our organization. But I want to start, and I'm hoping employers inside the room listening to me, right? I want to start by saying a big part of the problem we have is the fossilized thinking of leaders, right? The way we see talent development in an organization. We banter about the fact that there is a war for talent, and we use that term all over the world, and we're using it a lot. The truth is, within our organization, and I will do this quick so other persons can come, but I have a lot to say about it. The truth is, in practice, what's happening is that our leaders are paying quite a lot of attention to the P&L and the balance sheet, and they should. But we're not paying enough attention to the persons who are actually managing these P&L and balance sheet, right? So that's happening. We're supposed to be looking at where the business is going 5-10 years from now. Looking at the skill sets that's coming down the tube, build pipeline within the organization, take a chance on your people that is internal. But what's happening is that we're missing out on that opportunity, and then at the appropriate time, when a particular talent is required, then we're trying to go out and kind of headhunt the talent or scout it from somewhere else at higher cost in most instances, as opposed to doing internal development, succession and career development plans, individual development plans for our team members and giving our team members internal opportunities to grow. So if you ask me if there is a war for talent, I'm going to say, yes, there's a war for talent. And I say I'm talking more about talent rather than just labor. That's right. However, I think a big part of it is self-inflicted by our organizations. So we'll talk a lot about that a little later, but I'll say that for now.
I like that. That is food for thought. So Dr. Robinson is saying that some of what we're talking about is self-inflicted. Have we really, in our entities at the different enterprise levels, really looked carefully at internal growth, looking at honing talent internally? That is heavy, Dr. Robinson. But go ahead.
I personally don't think we're doing it well. I think it's a leadership problem that we have in this country, right, and in our businesses. How we see talent through the lens of leaders is something is absolutely wrong with it. For example, many leaders see good talent as somebody who is a clone of them, not understanding that in another 5 years they would have failed, right? And so we're not paying attention. I'm not saying that they're not good for the job, no. I'm just saying that by the time you need that talent in the future perspective, you in your current dispensation would have failed. So we have to look at what's coming down, the competencies that are required. We have emerged in a period of artificial intelligence, digital capabilities, machine learning, data analytics, the cyberspace, that kind of thing. Are we developing our people for that? And the last point I make on it before I hand over, because I know the two ladies, I'm sure have a lot to say on it, is the whole matter of coaching and mentoring. You know, learning really takes place in 3 buckets. We focus a lot on the formal learning. We focus a little less on the experiential-based learning. And we're terrible at coaching and mentoring, right? If you ask our emerging leaders within our business, how many of you have been coached within the last month or so on, they may not be able to tell you. In fact, the only time they may have gotten some sort of response is by annual appraisal. Those appraisals are just reports. There's nothing else other than just reports. Appraisals are supposed to be taking place daily. So in the organization, coaching and mentoring is supposed to be structured. But how do you expect your talent to develop at an accelerated pace and to change manage what's coming down the tube so that they can be comfortable with the change and be prepared for the new jobs as the old ones become redundant if you're not doing coaching and mentoring.
Okay. So the question to employers, what is your plan? What have you been doing about coaching and mentoring in your organization, irrespective of size of your organization? To the worker, have you ever participated in a coaching and mentorship program? What is your role as a worker? How do you, as a worker, participate in changing that internal dynamic within your organization for your own growth and development? Ms. Carol Rose Brown, the tourism sector, but I know you'll talk about several things.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you also for having me. I take a different view. I think we come to the same position, Dr. Robinson, but the business of the military-industrial complex, the country we have, the things it needs to progress, the things that are coming in the next 5 years. The solutions to those problems have to do with both the educational and training institutions and the organizations that are going to hire these people. In my country right now, in our country right now, I don't know, I cannot name 5 colleges of the over 70 that are in Jamaica now that have a relationship with even one private sector company. And therefore, the educational institutions are busy telling them about books that were written in 1975 to send them to work for poor Dr. Robinson, who is trying to run VN in 2024. And God knows with AI and ChatGPT, in 3 years, none of that is relevant. I don't understand how we keep doing this. This is not hard. In tourism, I have the same problem. Because a person goes to undergraduate school and gets a bachelor's degree in hospitality and tourism. They have never gone into a hotel. The teachers teaching them have never been into a hotel. But they want that person to show up and the general manager of Rio to give him a job in management, and he wants 6 figures. So I don't know. I don't know how this works. This is not hard. This is not hard. When I was a kid and I went to undergraduate school, I had to have a certain amount of practical work experience before I could get my piece of paper. When I went to work for Citibank, the registration alone, the orientation exercise took 5 days, and I'm a summer worker. So let me tell you what we do in tourism. We just take the view that, one, we are island people, we are going to leave. So if I need 200 hospitality workers in 6 months, I know I have to train 600 this month. Secondly, I know that when a person comes to Jamaica and has a terrible experience, he doesn't say, I went to Hotel Robinson and had a terrible experience. He says, Lord Jesus, I went to Jamaica and it was terrible. Because the geography lessons have not been taught, so they don't know the difference between Hotel Robinson and Jamaica. So I can't run the risk that a frontline person is going to give this visitor a bad experience and he's going to write it in Facebook. So I have to ensure that this guy has internationally benchmarked standards, knows what they are, and knows how to execute. And third, maybe most importantly, I must provide these candidates with opportunities to go and do real work in a real hotel. I cannot train them in a university with books that were written in 1975. These things don't work. So I don't understand why the rest of us aren't there. But I'm in tourism, and in tourism 5 years, 6 years ago, we had to make a decision to go in a different direction about the production and preparation of people for the sector. Listen, tourism is the driver of our economies, both in Jamaica and in the region. It means that this is a hotel complex, by the way. You see the engineering man, them who have the electricity going and the air conditioning going, they are in tourism. You see the people who made the decoration in here with the palm tree, them and the stage and the lighting, they are in tourism. So we need to understand, these are not hidden, these are not esoteric things, these are just plain, ordinary things right in front of you, ABC 1, 2, 3. We need to just wake up. We're the adults in the room. We need to wake up and just do it. Sorry.
All right. So the connection between education, making that transition from the schoolroom, and I say schoolroom because tertiary, to work, but not just making that transition, ensuring that what happens in the schoolroom is A, influenced and impacted by trainers that themselves have had the practical experience. It is like driving. You can tell somebody about driving, but if you have never driven, you really do not have the skill sets to teach someone to drive. And it is a fundamental part of a conversation, Carol, because what I hear you saying is that our education system and curriculum must be supported by trainers who themselves have gotten that practical experience, that current exposure to what is happening in the industry.
Let me go further, Mrs. Coronas. I mean, it's my favorite example. If you have a bachelor's degree in medicine, you're not a doctor. Remember, you have a bachelor's degree in medicine, you're not a doctor. In order to become a doctor, you need to go and do 2 years of internship under the leadership and guidance of somebody who is a certified, registered physician. And then if you do this for 2 years, and you go and take the people's exam, and you have to pass the people's exam. You do not pass the people's exam with 40 out of 100. And then if you do those 3 things, you get to be a medical doctor, an MD. Same thing with accounting, same thing with nursing, same thing with architecture. They are even now having a certified nail tech. You can't do somebody's nails these days unless you have a practical certification. Those of us women who have nails know that if you go to the wrong nail tech, your nails are going to burn you for the next 2 months. Do we not all know this? We all know this. That is what
yes, I do know that.
Yes. Certification is important, and people are looking not for credentials, and I'm not saying to anybody, don't go get your bachelor's and don't go get your master's and so please do that. But also remember that when you go to work for Jamaica National, Victoria Mutual, they're not interested in what PhD you have. They're interested in the bank balances. Can you do that? That is what they want. So go get the practical experience. Thank you very much.
Right. So the practical experience. And as we look to November 2025, Jamaica is going to be part of this World Summit on social development. We're looking at a human-centered approach. We're looking at the implications for labor markets. It is very clear that what you have said, Carol, is that there has to be a glue called internship. There has to be a component of tertiary education, and I would dare to say in all industries, that gives this practical exposure as part of the certification. I'm hearing this very loud and clear. All right, at this time, we're talking about emerging jobs. I remember about 2017, 2018, the first conversations that this ministry had about the future of work. The concerns and anxieties surrounded the fact that persons thought that oh, my job is going to go. I'm not going to have a job. The anxieties also surrounded, I have been trained in a particular way. I will not have the training needed for emerging jobs. When we spoke about the future of work, a lot of persons thought, oh, digitization. But there was not as much discourse in relation to other industries, the care economy, the green economy. And I know that you have been doing a lot of work on just transition, and you can discuss with us and explain to our viewers and listeners present what is this just transition, and also what are we supposed to be expecting in terms of the expansion of this green economy?
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, everyone, for having me. The first question that I was asked this morning, we had 2 interviews, radio interviews, and the first thing that was asked is, what is just transition? And it's, for me, and I think for everyone to understand, it's very, very simple. The word just, fear, and transition shift. So a fear shift to this new green economy that Jamaica and the rest of the world is building or moving towards. We have to ensure that persons are not left behind, and we take, as we've been saying, a human-centered approach. There is a word from the Xhosa language in South Africa called Ubuntu, and it focuses on humanity to others, and that's what just transition really embodies. It looks at being inclusive to everyone. It looks at ensuring that there are protections in place for persons that are in the workforce that have to go into this new economy that we're speaking of. And it's not necessarily only a green economy, but you're going to have transitions in other sectors, and whichever sector that you look at, it should be fair. You should ensure that you're looking and training persons and creating jobs for persons. We would have seen and walked around today. Outside there are not just employees, there are human beings with responsibilities, with families, who are seeking livelihoods to live decently. And therefore, the concept of just transition really seeks to embody and share that amongst everyone involved in the labor force, be it employers, be it workers, be it government, and those seeking employment. So, brief definition, human-centered approach, humanity to others, just transition, being fully inclusive.
All right, so in terms of the green jobs, when we talk about the green jobs, persons say, oh, we're talking about climate change, you know, those are buzzwords. But when we talk about green jobs, what can we look forward to? Here's an entrepreneur listening to us now. What opportunities would that entrepreneur have? And for a worker who wants to look at a new industry, what should they do to qualify for these jobs?
Okay, so green jobs look at jobs that seek to provide a more sustainable environmental outcome in the long term. So when you hear the term green job, persons start to think, oh, this is a new type of job that is being created. But even for some sectors that currently exist, for instance, manufacturing, what green jobs, you can have green jobs in the manufacturing sector, jobs that produce a service or a good that is good for the environment. Or it doesn't necessarily have to provide a green product or service, but the process to create typical goods and services are greener and safer, less emissions. We know that Jamaica, as a small island developing state, or what I now love, big ocean state, BOSS, that terminology has to look at becoming more resilient. We're affected by climate change. We have to ensure that Jamaica and the Caribbean create these jobs and sectors that reduce our emissions and mitigate against climate change, but also it adapts, are able to adapt. For example, in July, Jamaica was affected by Hurricane Beryl. That fully impacted the energy sector, being able to supply energy to a lot of persons. I believe it was in St. Elizabeth.
St. Elizabeth.
Yes, that I think it was up to 6 to 7 weeks they were without electricity. If you had a renewable energy source that could tap into the grid and support the energy that is required from consumers, you have an opportunity there to build your resilience. So, for instance, any entrepreneur looking to get into that green job space, you have the opportunity now to look at things like renewable energy, not just installing panels, but monitoring and assessing the energy outputs coming from these panels, what needs to be upgraded. Recently, we did a project in Barbados where we were trying to support businesses using greener processes. What we had to do was train what we called youth assessors. These youth assessors went into the businesses and created surveys and actually collected data based on what the businesses were doing so that they can see, okay, the business has 50% green processes ongoing, and it would take, let's say, X amount of years to be fully green, if that is what the businesses wanted. So it's being able to, one, look at the opportunities that are provided and also train the persons that are going into those new sectors. So how do we upskill them? How do we reskill them? How do we, and the point was made, how do we train the persons training them? Because the persons training them need to be retrained. We need persons employed in revising the curriculum for these types of jobs, putting in those green elements. In Guyana recently, we did something called a TVET, a Green and TVET tool, where we looked at current occupations within certain sectors. For instance, construction, we looked at plumbers and how we could reskill and upskill plumbers so that they can do PV installations in future. So there are a lot of opportunities there, not necessarily new jobs, but even the older jobs that exist and how we retrain, reskill persons there. What I would want to say though, while we are reskilling and retraining, we must also look at how we protect the persons that are being trained and have to transition. Because in some instances, there's going to be a time lag. So if the government wants to go in a greener direction within the economy, and I've decided I'm going to train 600 persons, not 600 persons will initially be employed. So what are we putting in place to ensure that those persons waiting to get into that green economy are safe, have the ability to earn to keep their families together, or so just providing basic safety nets, etc. Thanks.
And I like how you concluded your thought on that, because it is not just about training persons, but we have to support persons so that they can complete the training and be effective. Because we're not talking about, when we're reskilling and upskilling, we're not talking about new entrants to the labor market. These persons have obligations, families, and a social safety net is something that you mentioned. And that leads me into another part of the conversation, and I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Robinson. We are speaking about being globally competitive. And if you're even a micro business, a lot of micro businesses in Jamaica, some may be informal and many are formal. But there is a thrust towards doing business globally. There are many small craft persons that are actually making their craft items and independently marketing online globally. They are shipping, if you look at the number of shipping companies, it's not just a one-way flow of Amazon coming to Jamaica and buying online coming to Jamaica, but there are a lot of persons who are sending their products overseas. So when we have that conversation about the global business, what is the policy support? You're speaking to employers, you're speaking to job seekers, you're speaking to current workers. But what is it that you have to say to the government of Jamaica in terms of that policy support that is required so that we can address this labor demand and supply, especially in the context that things have changed. More people are working for themselves, although they may still want to take another job. What do you have to say to us? I heard the previous panel talk about relook at your laws. I think Yoni Epstein was the one that made that point. Re-examine your laws. Your laws are outdated. Miss Rose Brown said earlier, look back at your curriculum. You're using 1970s books to teach these persons. How can they be current if you're teaching them about the past? So I am trying to provoke your thoughts, but I'll hand over to you now, Dr. Robinson.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So that question had me thinking in different dimensions, right? I'm thinking from the perspective of small and medium-sized businesses, but I'm also thinking from the perspective of larger businesses that are in the business of, identifying talent to grow their business and to export and expand and so on. So I'll start there and then I go to the small and medium-sized businesses. I think there needs, from an employer standpoint, there needs to be greater flexibility in how we allow work to be performed in the future. That is definitely important. I mean, I've seen since the advent of COVID-19, a lot of employers were forced to pivot and to do remote and flexible work arrangements. Since then, many has gone back, and pretty much because they're unable to drive productivity internally or to build the culture that they require. But in my opinion, the advancement of technology since that time, these tools have become really better, and it's actually a competitive advantage in hiring talent, not just locally, but from overseas, to fill the talent gaps and the talent needs that you have. So we probably need to revisit our remote and flexible work arrangement. It's actually that flexibility that you need to onboard certain talents that you need. As it relates to the smaller and medium-sized businesses that are operating on their own, I've spoken to many of these persons, and the high cost that oftentimes impacts them in trying to export. And, I think there needs to be some way of arranging these different groups of people in a more collective way so that we can have some sort of economies of scale for them, right? Many of them, they may not say to you, but many of them, I would say, probably 80% of them that have started have failed, right? And it's not that they didn't have a good business idea, but the high cost of doing some of these things for them to both develop it and export it, I figure that we need to have some sort of, I don't know, in the tourism industry, how you guys do it, but some way of having them function in a collective space so that they can benefit from economies of scale. We need laws to support that kind of thing. The other thing that I would say in the competitive global space as well is that where we have talent gaps in our country, we need to figure out a way to get that talent into our country easier. and know that there's a pushback on it because there's a viewpoint that these guys are coming in to take local jobs. I don't necessarily agree with all of that. I feel that if you have a skills deficit within your economy, encouraging that skill set to come in so that you can have greater productivity and a growth in your organization will facilitate employment for even persons who are not employed. So I don't have that fear factor, and I feel that we need to relax our legislations a little bit to allow for that skill set not just to come in, but I might say something that may get me killed now, but I mean, even to see Jamaica as a home, if necessary, to raise a family and to stay. It's my view on it. Yeah.
All right, I like that. So our Vision 2030, you're saying that after a while, some of these people may want to make Jamaica a home, but the flexibilities of hiring local employees, the remote work, but also the flexibility of hiring from overseas. And you are clearly saying that in terms of policy, there is some work for the government to consider identifying clearly where those skill gaps or talent gaps exist.
I absolutely think that way. I mean, it would be good to be able to develop that talent here. But in the absence of it and the time that it would take you to do that impacts productivity in these respective businesses, why not let that talent come in? Specific talents we're talking about now that's identified, because I think that will boost growth, boost productivity, and you might find that your unemployment rate, in my mind, if done properly, may even go less than 4.5%. That's my view.
All right, so that is part of the formula to reduce unemployment to less than 4.2%. All right, so Carol,
just a couple
government policy.
Well, you know, there's already a policy to allow for work permits, and I sit on the work permit committee. I think it is very flexible. I think that all of us balk at the idea. I mean, it's the very point you made, that somebody's coming in to take my job. But the issue is that if we are not producing enough kids passing 6 or 8 CXCs, if we insist, if our numbers going into university remains at 3%, we are not going to be able to fill the number of jobs needed to increase our productivity and deliverable. These are just the facts. So we can all cuss, but unless we have produced a couple of children who have 8 CXCs and are going into these interesting jobs, we need to shut the lower halves of our faces. 1. 2. In tourism, we have invented a new thing called the Artisan Village at Falmouth, which is an attempt to connect that creative set to the tourism value chain. It's a blue ocean project. We have no blueprint. We're literally flying this plane while we're building it. So in the next year or so, we'll actually figure out how it works and what works and what doesn't work. So again, we're working on it. So these things exist. Artisans who have skills can come to us through the Tourism Linkages Network, which is an annual event where we identify persons with skills across the country and their items are evaluated. And down the road, they have the opportunity to set up their own businesses or become part of one of our artisan villages. So that's it.
Right, so the tourism sector, as you have said, you're building the plane and flying it at the same time. And clearly, it is a crisis that would have caused you to do this. To respond to the immediate need for this kind of cooperative.
Oh, yes.
This kind of, and Dr. Robinson alluded to it, that we have to look at the economies of scale. We have to look at cooperatives. So an entrepreneur should not feel that I'm alone. Correct. There is this space that is supported by government policy for the development of that particular entrepreneur in that particular industry. The International Labour Organization has been supporting government policy right across the globe, and our Caribbean office of the International Labour Organization has a project that will be rolled out starting in October. And you can just tell us a little bit about what that will do to enhance or help a country like Jamaica to support the green economy.
Okay, so currently we have what we call an internally funded project for Jamaica, looking at embedding climate policies and labor together. What we sat and did, we would have gone into what we call a war room and looked at Jamaica's climate policies, what currently exists, what they have agreed to at the international level. And then we would have looked at the national policies at home across all sectors. What we saw that was missing was the element of labor, because whatever you do, whatever commitments you have to the climate, work is based on your environment. So whatever you produce is coming from your climate. Whatever you use is coming from your earth, from your sky, from your seas. So but there was no aspect of labor involved there. So we decided that we would support Jamaica in terms of building in coherent policies that would link not only their climate, but labor policies together to ensure that across the board, everything is efficiently functioning, or as a well-oiled machine. So, for instance, the project would look at the climate change policies and labor information data. Based on the data collected, we'll run diagnostics and say, okay, you would like to do a policy on labor employment in the tourism sector, but there's not necessarily data there specific to green jobs or collected by Staten that can say in 5 years it's going to be necessary to have 1,500 jobs. We would have looked at the social protection aspect, looking at creating a safety net or employing social security measures that would cover not only maternity or disability, but even unemployment during a period of retraining or reskilling. How do you develop policies that are going to support education, employment, climate change, because they're all interlinked. We also have a component of the project that is going to look at building awareness and knowledge exchange. What we have found working within the Caribbean, and it's not new information, it's just information that hasn't been targeted. There are knowledge gaps. There are some countries that are moving further beyond at a quicker pace, and you can learn from them. There are things that Jamaica is doing that other countries can look at and learn. For instance, this roadshow that's happening right now, this is something that can be utilized in other territories and they can benefit from that. So the project really seeks to bring everything together in a coherent manner so that while preparing for your greener economy, based on the commitments made at what we call the Congress of Parties, COP, the Jamaican people, while transitioning, are looked after. No one is left behind. Everybody is included. There are aspects of social dialogue. ILO prides itself on tripartite dialogue, but this even goes beyond that because we're working with non-traditional partners at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation with the Climate Change Division. Those are not our usual partners. We work directly with the Ministry of of labor. But we have seen now there is a need to break silos for everybody to be engaged, for everybody to have the conversations. And so that when policies are formulated, it's not just, okay, we created a labor policy focusing on labor. It must look at, okay, the changes that we're making in either tourism, or we're making in climate change, or we're making in education, because it's fully cross-cutting. Even when we speak to things like agriculture and looking at nature-based solutions, instead of utilizing pesticides, we look at using species that can take care of the pests that are impacting the growth and agriculture in Jamaica. You have a food import bill of just over $1 billion US. If that money could be reallocated somewhere else to develop proper skills, you will be able to feed Jamaica as well as have persons trained in other areas, manufacturing, whatever, so that the raw materials that you take from agriculture can go on to be sold secondary or tertiary level and exported, increasing your productivity. So there are linkages in every aspect. So the project seeks to look at policies across sectors, across ministries, agencies, divisions, entities like Workers and Employers Federation, so that when you decide to build a policy, the policy is fully inclusive.
Right, so definitely we have to look at a multi-stakeholder response. And I did hear the Jamaica Employers Federation speak about that today, that we can't do this in silos, we can't do it alone, we have to do it together. And at times, we don't look at the natural connection. We feel that we're talking about the health sector, or we're talking about the mining sector, or we're talking about climate change, and we focus on the particular issue, but not look at it in a comprehensive manner. What will be the change that is needed in terms of ensuring that whatever we're doing is climate friendly? Mm-hmm. It is looking at what is the implication for the green economy. So it requires a government policy to have a more joined up approach, and I'm happy to report that that's why you're here, because we have that joined up approach, and through that project we'll be able to advance more. All right, so as we put a wrap on this discussion, I do know that I've led you in several different ways, but just wanting to ask you each to give us that one statement that may be significant as we look at Jamaica's sustainable development, Jamaica's social development from a human-centered perspective, that development that is required immediately to make sure that when we're talking at a World Summit, that is something that must come up.
In closing, I think there's a new term that I learned, intellectual honesty. The minister spoke about job seekers being able to look at themselves and understand where they are and actually understand what they want to do. I think as a country, as a region, we have to look at ourselves and be intellectually honest about where we are, where we want to go, and look at the gaps that exist and collaborate with each other to fill those gaps so that we can get to our final end goal.
All right, powerful statement.
Someone said it earlier today, that regardless of what we do, human beings have to do it. I don't care how much money you spend in your infrastructure, your technology, it requires people. And we have to find a more inclusive way of developing our people. Right now, we're developing our people in silos. We're developing our people in silos that were established in the 1950s. those things cannot work. And we have got to consciously make a change. We're the adults in the room. We're going to have to do it.
My closing statements along those same lines. There needs to be greater collaboration between, among government, private sector, and the tertiary institutions. And a lot of what we do in terms of our talent development must be based on research. I don't think we use the data that we have to make meaningful decisions for the future. And I think the information is there, and I think it just requires greater collaboration as we plan for the future.
There you have it. As we bring the curtains down on this convention or Western Regional Roadshow, I am happy that we have been able to have this kind of discussion, one that takes Jamaica forward. And at this time, I want to say a big thank you to my esteemed panelists, Dr. Dayton Robinson, Ms. Carol Rose Brown, and Ms. Marissa Shepherd. Can we have a round of applause for our panel? Thank you. Thank you, Marissa. Watch Dr. Dayton going on first. All right, so at this time, as we do, Dr. Robinson, panelists, if you just stand to the side here, we'll have a quick presentation, just a token from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security in appreciation for the time you took to have this discussion with us. So I'll just ask the ladies to hand over quickly. All right, so we want to thank you all for your participation. We are beyond 4:30, but in Jamaica, we could safely say it is 4:30 Jamaican time. So thank you very much for attending, and the conversation is not over. Oh, I'm told that they have not finished giving out the tokens of appreciation. I want to invite Ms. Riesel Melville from the International Labour Organization to come forward. Let us put our hands together. And Dr. Robinson, I did hear you say that at the risk of getting yourself in trouble, we could invite persons to Jamaica to be part of our labor force, and they may want to live in Jamaica as part of Vision 2030. And our Honorable Minister did take up Ms. Melville on her suggestion that she could move to Jamaica. And I see that there's a second Trinidadian in the room with that same sentiment. There is another presentation for our moderator for the second panel, which became the first panel, and she is Mrs. Tamar Nelson, the Chief Technical Director of the Jamaica Productivity Centre. Thank you very much, Mrs. Nelson. All right, so I think at this time I can safely say, war good, take care. Thank you so much for being here.